Hey everybody, so let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll finish out this last lecture, all right? All right, so moving forward, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different particular groups within LGBTQ plus feminism, LGBTQ plus rights movements. There's several different sections. You have lesbian feminism, which is where I went in there. And this was essentially the lesbians that came out of the feminist movement that decided that there was a lot of homophobia, transphobia. There was a lot of places that just didn't feel inclusive to them. Sexism in the gay rights movement and homophobia in the feminist movement really, again, drove this need for their spaces. Unfortunately, there became a lot of women's only spaces, and unfortunately, they were also had a lot of spaces, including the Women's Music Festival, which sparked a lot of controversy because it was just not trans inclusive. They didn't want to allow like young men that were coming with moms to be part of it. They wanted these women's only spaces to be specifically women and specifically catered to the sex of an individual, not the gender. And so that created a lot of problems for them and a lot of disconnects between the ideas that they wanted to spread and the lacking of inclusion that ended up happening within that particular group. AIDS activism spurred up a lot in the 1980s due to Reagan's really neglect and this labeling the AIDS crisis as a queer problem. Gay Men's Health Crisis was a group that educated the queer community on safe sex practices. It trained volunteers for the care of patients within hospitals and was really working towards societal messages that deconstructed this idea that someone that was HIV or AIDS positive was dangerous or ultimately going to get you sick. AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP, really wanted direct actions. They relied on demonstrations and civil disobedience. They protested high medical costs and lack of civil spaces and lack of resources, including really just that ability to have housing when their medical issues started to mature towards the end of life when they could no longer care for themselves. They really wanted a more inclusive than a mainstream gay rights movement. Because the AIDS community affected so many parts of the queer community, this particular group really started the intersectionality trend way before some of the other groups got on board. One of the more recent ones is the Queer Nation and the Undocumented Queer Youth. Queer Nation was really trying to take the tactics of ACT UP, which we just talked about, to a more broad gay rights movement. This is really about visibility and anti-violence, and they really were focused on being intersectional, focused on being inclusive, but it was also catered to a much younger group of queer persons, and that really allowed for emergence of new voices, emergence of more voices at the table, and really creating parts of a movement and continued now that has room for growth. Undocumented queer youth activism really stood up a lot for the Break the Cage and really trying to bring light and shed light on the really awful things that were happening at our border and continue to be happening at our border due to really bad immigration policies. They supported the DREAM Act. They considered themselves DREAM activists, which was really talking about the idea of making sure that we're having conversation about immigration laws, and specifically immigration laws in reference to political refugees or social refugees due to one's sexuality or gender expression. So trans activism, there's always been trans activism, and there's always been trans people in the LGBTQ plus movement. Do not let anybody tell you different. Early activism really fought for visibility. Transvestia was, I need you all to look this up. You read it a little bit in your book, but I need you to actually look it up. It's amazing. It has deep roots in the gay rights movements and in Stonewall. The trans movement can include intersex persons, trans persons, non-binary persons, and drag queen and kings. It really gives a different space for people. And it's really discussing the freedom of gender expression, the right to form families and access civil rights, body autonomy, and the access of gender spaces. And this also is a really big push for access to medical care, and really fighting against gender discrimination. And there's been some really amazing work within the trans rights movement. Bisexual activism, there's just not as much coverage of this, which is unfortunate. But the Bisexual Resource Center, or BiNet USA, are resources for some of those particular marches and those particular movements. And they really work towards visibility and legitimacy that sometimes they don't get within other movements, specifically the LGBTQ plus movement. And they really felt like getting the B within the LGBTQ plus movement was a really big accomplishment. The sex workers movements moving to things that are not directly related to LGBTQ plus persons, but it was heavily really discussed in Module 4, and it's really just, again, focused on legislation surrounding safety, autonomy, reporting crimes against them, and against police violence. LGBTQ plus activism now, and I left you a host of particular groups that work on this, particular projects and organizations. Right now, specifically, there's a period in time where, for whatever reason, the specific right-wing movements have geared towards chastising and trying to criminalize the Trevor Project, which is incredibly inappropriate and misguided, because the Trevor Project works to end suicide in LGBTQ plus youth, and just is an amazing amount of resources. So just a reminder that as you go through the world, you're going to see opposition to any movement that is inclusive. Also look towards things like Black Lives Matter, which caters and is made possible by queer women of color. I want to thank you for being part of this class. I want to thank you for being part of these discussions. And I want to thank you for really engaging in ways that is so positive to see. I hope that all of you have gained a sense of pride in yourself, in your allyship, in being able to express yourself as a person in the fullest way possible, and allow yourself to be fluid in the ways you express yourself, because we are never the same person young as we are when we age. We're never the same person we are as a teenager as we are in college. These things change, and you mold and you form into humans, and you deserve respect and dignity in that process. And if you ever need anything, or you ever have a situation where you do not know how to navigate it, or you need resources, please do not hesitate to contact me. If I don't have the resource, I will find it, or find someone who can find it. And also, as you move through your academic journey, there will be things that come up within your classroom settings. There will be things that you just may not know how to do. Please do not hesitate to reach out. Just because this class ends does not make you any less somebody that I value and somebody that I want to be part of your academic journey. So again, thank you so much for being part of this class. And if you all need anything, please reach out. Thank you so much.